That's right, Bianca. Thank you. I am standing here with Senator Ted Cruz. We want to talk a little bit about the border and the DOJ. Senator Cruz, great to have you with us.
John, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So first, I wanted to talk to you about Mark Houck and actually, let's start with the border. And I saw a new report from the Media Research Center which talked about the actual coverage of the crisis on the border by the mainstream media networks has been dwarfed by the recent coverage of Ron DeSantis. Give us your take on this, and why is there a lack of curiosity about this crisis on the border from the mainstream media?
Well, it's worse than a lack of curiosity. It is active propaganda. They are deliberately trying to hide what's happening. And the reason is simple. If you see what is happening on the southern border, it's indefensible. 4.4 million people have crossed illegally under Joe Biden. If you go down there, I spend a lot of time on the southern border, and you see the children packed into the Biden cages. You see the little boys and little girls who've been physically assaulted and sexually assaulted. You see every hospital in South Texas is overflowing. The jails are overflowing. The schools are overflowing. You see South Texas farmers and ranchers that show you photograph after photograph of dead bodies they find on their properties, pregnant women, elderly people, little children who the traffickers abandon in the heat to die. You cannot defend this chaos. You see the 53 bodies who died in a tractor trailer of heat exposure by the traffickers. You see the over 100,000 people who overdosed on fentanyl. The Joe Biden body bags keep piling up and up and up. And the only defense that Biden has is to ignore it and to count on the corrupt corporate media refusing to tell the American people about what's happening.
I know you talked to the Border Patrol, the officials working there. They want to do their jobs. They want to enforce the law. Imagine if the same type of attention was paid to the border that was paid to guys like Mark Houck, who is the Catholic activist who is now being arrested by the FBI.
Well, what happened to Mark Houck was absolutely outrageous. And this Department of Justice, this FBI, has now been thoroughly politicized and weaponized. Merrick Garland has done more damage to the credibility of the Justice Department and the FBI than any attorney general in history. You know, I've got a new book that's coming out in 2 weeks. It's entitled Justice Corrupted: How the Left Has Weaponized the Legal System. And what it traces, it starts with Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon tried to do this. He tried to use DOJ and the FBI and the IRS to go after his political enemies. But the system largely worked. They largely refused to go along with him. They said no, it failed, and he resigned in disgrace. Well, what Richard Nixon tried to do, Barack Obama succeeded in doing, weaponizing DOJ, the FBI, the IRS, and now under Joe Biden it has metastasized and gotten worse. It is ridiculous that Mark Houck, a pro-life activist, someone who does sidewalk counseling at abortion clinics to try to encourage young mothers to keep their children, that Merrick Garland would send 20 to 30 FBI agents to raid his house at the crack of dawn. His wife and children are screaming, they're crying, they handcuff him, they treat him like they're arresting Osama bin Laden. He had volunteered to turn himself in, but this wasn't law enforcement, this was theater. This was the Biden DOJ saying, if you're our political opponent, we're sending stormtroopers after you. This is disgusting. Politicizing the Department of Justice.
This furthers the belief that there is a two-tiered system of justice in this country. There should be oversight of this. Where is that right now?
Well, with a Democrat Senate and a Democrat House, there is zero oversight. The Senate Judiciary Committee, we ought to be having hearings. We ought to have the head of the FBI, the Attorney General, explaining why he thought it was fine to send FBI agents in to raid Mar-a-Lago, to raid the president's house. First time in history that's ever been done. That was an abuse of power, but it's routine. This is an attorney general who directed the FBI to target parents as domestic terrorists. Why? For daring to speak up at school boards and speak out against woke nonsense, speak out against critical race theory, lies being taught to their kids, speak out against transgender policies being used to cover up sexual assaults of children in school bathrooms. And what does Joe Biden say? Mom and dad at home, you're a terrorist. And the FBI right now, the FBI is going and interviewing parents all over the country pursuant to this political DOJ. It's disgraceful. And let me be clear, John. I don't want to see a Republican Department of Justice. I don't want to see a Democrat Department of Justice. I want to see a Department of Justice and an FBI that enforces the law, that follows the law fairly and is blind to political party, that is not a partisan weapon. That's what it's been throughout most of its history, and under Joe Biden, he treats it like the stormtroopers for the Democratic National Committee.
And real quickly, as you wrap up, you say the only way that this accountability will take place is if Republicans win back control of the House and the Senate.
That is absolutely right. I think that's going to happen. I think November is going to be a fantastic election. I think we're going to win the House. We're going to win the Senate. And I think one of the very first steps, we need to have real oversight. We need to have hearings. We need to drag the Attorney General before the Senate Judiciary Committee. We need to drag the FBI. We need to get to the bottom of this. We need to use subpoena power. We need a clean house at the FBI and get rid of the corrupted partisans at the senior levels. And I'll tell you what, the House of Representatives needs to impeach Merrick Garland, and they need to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and we need to have trials in the United States Senate on their abuse of power and the incredible damage it's doing to the rule of law and to Americans across this country.
Well, Senator Cruz, thank you for talking to us in person. Always a pleasure to see you. Thanks so much.
John.
All right, Bianca, standing here with Senator Ted Cruz. We'll throw it back to you guys in the studio.